Life has a way of unfolding in the most unexpected ways. That night, as I sat alone in a small hotel room, my thoughts drifted to everything that had led me there. For months, my husband Michael had been working in another city, and while I tried to stay composed, the distance wore me down. I missed him. Not just his presence, but the attention and care that had slowly faded. The emotional distance was what truly consumed me on those long, lonely nights. I never imagined that a simple request to my stepson, Jason, to let me tag along with his father would lead to us being stranded together in a cramped hotel room, sharing a space meant for one. At the time, I had no idea how much that night would change everything. Let me tell you everything from the beginning. Every little detail. Believe me, the end of this story is going to be far more exciting than you expect. That morning, as I was leaving home, I caught a brief glimpse of myself in the mirror. And I was tense, yes, but I still looked good. Even though Michael had been leaving me so alone lately, I still felt desirable. I still felt alive. But even those feelings were no longer enough. They didn't satisfy me. In the kitchen, Jason was finishing his breakfast when I called out to him from behind. "You're starting college at the end of the summer. I know. But you need to work on your driving. Come on, take me with your father." He looked at me with that same mischievous smile he always had. Jason was a sweet boy with a peculiar and funny side, but sometimes he could be a little problematic. "Okay, stepmother," he said in a teasing tone, "but on one condition. Tell Dad to buy me a better car for the summer." "We'll talk about that," I replied curtly, eager to get this trip started. But I had no idea the trip wouldn't go as planned. We had been driving for about 2 hours. I was in the back seat scrolling through my phone while Jason played random songs on the radio and told silly jokes that only he found funny. Suddenly, the car made a terrible sound, a loud hiss, and then it completely shut off. "What's going on, Jason?" I asked, trying not to sound too alarmed. "I think the car broke down," he muttered, pulling over to the side of the road, clearly frustrated. And just like that, we were stranded in the middle of nowhere. I barely had phone signal and there wasn't a soul around to help. We spent 2 hours arguing, calling every mechanic we could find and trying to fix the car. Eventually, we had to accept the obvious. Our only option was to spend the night at the nearest motel. At the motel reception, while Jason was talking to the guy at the counter, I stood behind him, feeling utterly frustrated. If Michael finds out about this, he's going to be furious, I thought. But strangely, in that moment, it didn't seem to matter all that much. Deep down, I knew something about tonight was going to change everything. Before this story takes an even more unexpected turn, be sure to subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications. I promise you'll be drawn in by what comes next. And honestly, I find myself yearning for your support in the comments. It brings me a sense of comfort and connection, one that offers a quiet, personal kind of satisfaction. As we stepped into the room and turned the handle, I felt my hopes collapse around me, giving way to a heavy, unsettling silence. The space felt incredibly small, almost suffocating, as I struggled to even turn around. In the stillness of the room, I found myself surrounded by nothing more than a bed, a nightstand, and a faint, flickering light on the ceiling. It cast a dim glow, illuminating the space in a way that felt both comforting and haunting, revealing the contours of my thoughts as they drifted through the quiet night. The ceiling loomed oppressively low above me while the air conditioning barely managed a whisper of relief. A single narrow window offered nothing but a view of the parking lot, just enough to remind me of a world that suddenly felt very far away. "This is it," I whispered to myself. His smile caught me off guard. It shouldn't have, but it sparked something in me that I struggled to name. As much as I hated the idea, I found myself wondering whether being alone with Jason that night might not be as terrible as I once believed. Standing there, I realized that being around Jason stirred memories of my younger days, of uncertainty, of emotions I couldn't fully understand. What had I been expecting? A five-star hotel? I caught myself questioning what that even meant. The allure of luxury, the promise of comfort. Yet beneath it all, I wondered, Can it ever truly fill the void within? Each star stands for a promise, an expectation, but do they ever reflect the truth of what we're really seeking? We only have this one night. Let's just take a breath, stepmother. His mocking tone, laced with that ever present mischievous smile, deepened my frustration and left me wrestling with emotions I couldn't quite place. Yet I found it difficult to fully embrace the notion of hating Jason's carefree and relaxed attitude. Being near him, though, I would never confess it, awakened a deep feeling within me. An emotion swells within me, one that I struggle to grasp completely. The heat wraps around me like a heavy blanket, suffocating and relentless. I find myself rubbing my forehead, trying to ease the pressure that builds with each passing moment. As I watch Jason, he casually throws himself onto the bed, lying on his back, the weight of the world momentarily lifted from his shoulders. This is your kingdom, Diane. Take the time you need to truly feel at home here. I found myself gazing at him for just a fleeting moment. I noticed how much he had grown, and that observation stirred within me a sense of time passing, of how relationships evolve. It made me pause and reflect on the complexities of attraction, how appearances can evoke such deep feelings and thoughts. Yet, I found myself struggling to push that thought away, lingering in the depths of my mind. In the quiet moments, I find myself reflecting on the fact that he was Michael's son, my stepson. It stirs something deep within me, a blend of connection and complexity that I can't quite articulate. As I stepped into the bathroom, I gently closed the door, sealing myself away from the world outside. In that fleeting moment, I found myself gazing deeply into my own reflection in the mirror. The heat clung to me, making my hair stick to my skin, yet somehow I felt a sense of beauty within that moment. I found myself reflecting on the remnants of that spark within me. I turned on the shower, allowing the water to cascade down, and stepped beneath it, yearning for the warmth to cleanse the tangled emotions that had taken root within me. As I sit quietly, I find myself reflecting on the fact that I am 47 years old now. Jason has grown up, no longer the child I once knew. At 22, he stands on the brink of a new chapter, preparing to embark on his journey into university life. Here we find ourselves, confined within the walls of this small hotel room, sharing these fleeting days together. The thought stirred something deep within me, a mix of unease and exhilaration that I struggled to put into words. Michael slowly surfaced in my thoughts, lingering there as I reflected on our moments together. Michael had this desire to surprise you, to be near you, to share moments together, yet here I am, confined in this hotel room with your son, and I find myself lost in a whirlwind of emotions, unsure of how to process it all. The steam from the shower enveloped the small bathroom, creating a cocoon of warmth that wrapped around me. I stood there, lost in thought, as the world outside faded away, leaving only the gentle sound of water cascading down. It was a moment of solitude where I could reflect on the day's events and the emotions swirling within me, each breath mingling with the mist that hung in the air. The warmth enveloped me, soothing my body, yet my thoughts spiraled in a whirlwind, refusing to settle. As I watched Jason smile and felt the ease of his presence, I found myself stirred by an unexpected warmth deep inside. As I stood beneath the cascading water, a sense of uncertainty enveloped me. I couldn't quite grasp what this spark might evolve into, yet deep within I felt the unmistakable stirrings of change. Eventually, I found myself making my way down for dinner, hoping to find some clarity in the midst of my swirling thoughts. I slipped into a light and flowing dress, feeling the fabric gently embrace me as I moved. It was as if the dress whispered secrets of comfort and grace, inviting me to reflect on the moments that led me here. In that moment, it felt just right for this sweltering heat, yet there was something more. It wrapped around me like a gentle embrace, soothing the strange tension that had settled within me, urging me to let go and breathe a little easier. The hotel restaurant felt warm and inviting, a comforting space that seemed just right for its modest size. I found myself ordering a light meal and a glass of wine, yearning for that gentle embrace of relaxation to wash over me. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I found myself enveloped in the gentle glow of the streetlights outside the hotel, their soft illumination casting a warm, almost nostalgic light on the world around me. Sitting there, I found my thoughts wandering back to the room upstairs, a place filled with memories that tugged at my heart. I'd find myself lost in thought, pondering what Jason might be doing at this very moment. It's hard to imagine someone so restless and brimming with energy finding joy in the confines of a narrow room. I can almost feel the tension in the air, the way it must weigh on him, stifling his spirit. Yet, there was something about his relaxed, carefree attitude that stirred a whirlwind of emotions within me, leaving me perplexed and unable to articulate why it affected me so deeply. As I finished my wine, I took a moment to gaze at my plate one last time before I began my slow ascent up the stairs. As I stepped into the room, a profound stillness enveloped me, wrapping around my thoughts like a gentle embrace. As I opened the door, the sight that met my eyes took my breath away, leaving me suspended in a moment of quiet reflection. I found Jason in a quiet moment, having just showered, lying in bed, wrapped in his robe, lost to the world in deep sleep. As she stood there, the fabric of her robe fell away, exposing the delicate contours of her slender, fit form. I found myself lost in the moment, captivated by the vulnerability and strength that seemed to coexist within her. My damp hair brushed against my forehead, and a faint smile lingered on my lips as if I were lost in a dream. My heart started to thump in my chest, each beat echoing in the silence around me. It was the final revelation I never anticipated encountering. For a moment, I found myself frozen at the door, uncertainty wrapping around me like a heavy blanket, leaving me unsure of my next step. Within me, a peculiar blend of feelings swirled, each one vying for attention. There was a warmth creeping into my cheeks, a sense of embarrassment washing over me, yet my gaze remained fixed on him, unable to look away. "Diane, what on earth are you doing?" "It's my son, Michael's boy." I found myself wrapped in a quiet storm of self-reproach. Yet my eyes faltered, inexplicably drawn to the section of his robe that had slipped away, revealing more than I intended to see. What I witnessed awakened a gentle warmth within me. The cramped space of the room seemed to amplify my feelings, wrapping around me like a heavy blanket, suffocating yet familiar. In that moment, I realized there was no other bed, just the weight of solitude pressing down on me, a reminder of the choices I had made and the paths I had not taken. In the quiet of the night, I found myself wondering if she lay beside him, enveloped in warmth, or if she chose the solitude of a chair, lost in her thoughts as the hours slipped away. In this sweltering heat, the thought of finding a chair felt like an unattainable dream. As I stepped into the room, time seemed to stretch, each moment heavy with unspoken thoughts and feelings. As I sat there, I could hear Jason's steady and rhythmic breathing, a sound that seemed to envelop the room in a quiet embrace. I inhaled deeply, attempting to focus, yet the turmoil within me clouded my thoughts, leaving me adrift in confusion. I found myself needing to gather my thoughts and emotions, to piece together the fragments of my being. "All right, Diane," I whispered softly, feeling the weight of the moment settle around me. "It's only one night, nothing beyond that. This feels like it holds no significance. I had this beautiful idea to surprise Michael, but now I find myself here, caught in a moment of uncertainty. I find myself wrestling with the urge to be rational, to maintain a sense of calm amidst the chaos that surrounds me." I moved slowly towards the bed, my gaze fixed on Jason, lost in thought. His innocent expression seemed to weave itself into the fabric of my already tangled thoughts, deepening the complexity of my feelings. I found myself perched on the edge of the bed, lost in thought about how the night would unfold before me. In the stillness of the night, a gentle sound stirred me from my slumber. As I slowly peeled my eyes open, I took a moment to let the world come into focus, scanning the room with a sense of quiet contemplation. I felt a subtle shift in the bed, and my gaze turned to Jason, who was stirring softly in his sleep. I watched him, his eyes heavy with a lingering drowsiness, as he ran his hands through his hair, the gentle scratching of his scalp almost a soothing rhythm in the stillness of the moment. I lay there, my eyes barely cracked open, watching him from the shadows of my own thoughts, pretending to be lost in sleep. Yet, deep within me, a storm raged, far from the surface's tranquility. In that moment, I became acutely aware of it. His gaze lingers on me, a weight that pulls me into a deeper reflection. As I felt my heart start to race, A wave of emotions washed over me, pulling me into a deeper reflection of what was unfolding around me. He was gazing at me, and in that moment, I felt a wave of vulnerability wash over me. I attempted to hold onto the facade, wearing a drowsy expression and staying motionless, yet inside me, emotions stirred, restless and unresolved. As I stood there, the weight of the moment settled quietly around me. In the solitude of the bathroom, I sought a pause from the noise in my mind, unaware of just how layered and tangled my thoughts had become. Each movement felt deliberate, filled with reflection. I stood in front of the mirror, not just seeing my reflection, but confronting the quiet strength and vulnerability I carry within, recognizing how time has shaped both who I am and how I view myself. As I watched the subtle shifts of his muscles with each movement, an unexpected warmth began to unfurl within me. It was beyond my control. In that quiet moment, I found myself grappling with two profound realizations. As I watched Jason, a part of me felt a strange acceptance of the unfolding events, almost as if I was reluctant to intervene, to disrupt the moment that was so deeply entwined with my own feelings. I reached into the closet, my fingers brushing against the fabric, and pulled out a pair of shorts. The moment felt heavy with memories, each thread whispering stories of warmer days and fleeting moments. As he went about his task, I could feel his gaze flicker towards me, a subtle, almost hesitant glance from the corner of his eye, as if he were searching for signs of my awareness, wondering if I was truly awake in that moment. Their gazes stirred something deep within me, igniting a flutter of emotions I couldn't quite grasp. I found myself caught in a delicate balance, desperately trying to hold back, yet surrendering entirely to the weight of the moment that enveloped me. Once I slipped into the shorts, I found myself lingering in the quiet of the room, not quite ready to return to the comfort of the bed. In that moment, she settled into the chair in the corner of the room, her gaze fixed on me, as if she were trying to unravel the depths of my thoughts. The weight of their gaze felt unsettling, yet it awakened something profound and unnameable within my soul. I lay there, my eyes shut tight, lost in the stillness, pretending to drift away into sleep. But how long could I continue to wear this mask? At last, I found myself unable to bear the weight any longer, and I sank down into a stillness that enveloped me. As my gaze locked with Jason's, I felt an overwhelming urge to express everything that stirred within me, unfiltered and raw. Your presence stirs something deep within me, Jason. Those words hung in the air, a palpable weight that I could almost touch. In that moment, a profound realization washed over me, and I understood that everything had irrevocably changed. As Jason's eyes fluttered momentarily, I felt the weight of the silence enveloping us. He inhaled deeply, as if gathering the fragments of his thoughts, and then, with a hesitant voice, he began to share what lay within him. Fumable. I find myself at a loss, Diane, he murmured, his voice low yet resolute. Since my father left, we have shared this space for what feels like an eternity. With each passing moment, I find my feelings for you deepening, unfolding in ways I never anticipated. There are moments when I find it hard to conceal the deep admiration that wells up inside me for you. In this moment, it seems as if I am caught in a dream, a surreal haze that envelops my thoughts. His words caught me off guard, yet they awakened a deep feeling inside me. Jason held my gaze unwavering, as if the world around us faded into a distant blur. As I looked into his eyes, I felt an honesty and passion that wrapped around me, leaving me utterly entranced. As the dawn approaches, I find myself contemplating the task ahead of me, fixing the car. The thought of rising early lingers in my mind, a quiet reminder of the responsibilities that await. I press on, feeling each moment stretch before me, a quiet journey into the depths of my thoughts. His voice carried a tremor, as if he were searching for reassurance within himself, yet his gaze remained steady, unwavering, as if anchored to something deeper. In this moment, my gaze is completely drawn to you, Diane. In this moment, I find myself grappling with emotions I've never encountered before. My heart felt like it was racing, each beat echoing in the silence around me. In that moment, I found myself shifting to the edge of the bed, settling into the chair that faced him directly. As my gaze met hers, a wave of unspoken feelings washed over me. There was a profound connection between us, one that transcended the need for words. In that quiet moment, we lingered in silence. His lips gently pursed as he turned his gaze toward me, a weight of unspoken thoughts hanging in the air between us. As I sit here, I find myself thinking about you, Jason. Your presence lingers in my mind, a gentle reminder of moments we shared. I can't help but reflect on the paths we've taken, the choices that have led us to this point. It's a quiet contemplation, one that stirs a blend of nostalgia and longing within me. I wonder how you are, what thoughts occupy your days, and if you ever pause to think of me too. There's a depth to these feelings, a connection that feels both fragile and profound. In this stillness, I embrace the memories, allowing them to wash over me like a soft tide, reminding me of the beauty and complexity of our journey together. I spoke softly, my voice carrying a mix of wonder and a hint of defiance. Am I really understanding what you mean? As I looked into Jason's eyes, I sensed a profound depth, a longing to experience this moment not through the clamor of words, but through the quiet resonance of emotions. He remained silent, yet the depth of his gaze conveyed everything I needed to understand. In that moment, a heavy truth settled within me. I understood that we had crossed a line from which there was no return. As I gazed into his eyes, I felt a wave of courage wash over me, mingling with an intense, almost overwhelming longing that stirred deep within my soul. The blend of uncertainty and fervor in his gaze pulled me in deeper. As I inhaled deeply, I felt the weight of my thoughts pressing against my chest. When I finally began to speak again, my voice emerged steady, yet it carried an undercurrent of resolve. "Jason," I whispered, hoping to capture his full attention. "As I stepped into the room, I found you peacefully asleep, your robe gently parted, and in that moment I felt an overwhelming pull to gaze at you, unable to look away. It touched me deeper than I ever anticipated. It's impossible to escape these emotions. Deep down, we both understand that truth. As my words lingered in the stillness around me, I found myself taking a tentative step forward, rising slowly to my feet. His gaze lingered on every subtle shift I made, and I could feel the quickening of his breath, a reflection of the tension that hung in the air between us. Emotions surged within me, overwhelming and profound. As my fingers found the sash of my dress, I took my time to untie it, feeling the weight of the moment. With each gentle tug, I noticed the subtle shift in his breathing, a quiet reflection of the tension that hung in the air between us. As I spoke, my voice quivered, and I found myself reflecting deeply on the need to find balance in our lives. With a gentle pull, I began to unzip the back of my dress, each movement deliberate and filled with a quiet weight. The fabric gently slipped from my shoulders, cascading down to the floor, leaving me feeling exposed and vulnerable in that quiet moment. The cool breeze caressing my skin seemed to intensify the fire that raged within me, each breath a reminder of the turmoil I felt inside. In that moment, I felt a deep connection, as if his gaze held a universe of unspoken words and emotions. It was as if time slowed down, and I could see the layers of his soul reflected back at me. There was a moment, unexpected and profound, where I felt a rush of admiration wash over me, mingling with an attraction that pulled at my very core, impossible to ignore. The silence that lingered between us seemed to weave an unspoken connection, a thread that tied our hearts together in a way words could never capture. In this moment, I felt the deep connection of our dreams, woven together in a way that seemed to transcend the ordinary. As I moved closer, my gaze remained locked on his, each step feeling heavy with unspoken words. "Now," I whispered softly to myself, wondering if we truly understood each other in this moment. Jason's gaze lingered on me, his expression unwavering, a smoldering intensity that seemed to reach deep within my soul. In that moment, he rose slowly, his gaze never leaving mine, and flicked on the light, illuminating the space around us. The soft glow enveloped the space around me as he drew near and turned the key in the lock. My heart started to thump in my chest, each beat echoing in the stillness around me. In that moment, it was as if time itself had come to a standstill, and all that existed was the connection between us. As he took a step towards me, I felt my breath catch in my throat, a flutter of anticipation stirring within me. It felt as though he was peering into the depths of my soul, searching for something unspoken. Yet, there was an undeniable awareness of the quiet pull that lingered in the space between us. As he drew near, he reached out instinctively, steadying me when I nearly stumbled. The gesture caught me off guard, not because of what it meant, but because of how unfamiliar it felt to be supported again, awakening something deep within. In that moment, a deep silence settled between us, filled with unspoken thoughts and emotions. His gaze lingered on me, and I felt a quiet tension in the air, uncertain yet undeniably present. I looked away, trying to steady my breath, overwhelmed by the intensity of the moment. There was a stillness that seemed to stretch time, as if everything had paused, inviting reflection rather than action. It wasn't clarity I found, but a sense of emotional weight I hadn't expected, one that made me question what this connection truly mean. As my hands found their way to his shoulders, I couldn't help but notice the strength and warmth that surrounded me, a comforting presence that seemed to wrap around my very being. In that moment, the distance that once separated us faded away, and I could feel our breaths intertwining, creating an intimate connection that enveloped us both. In that moment, it was as if all the feelings we had kept hidden erupted, filling the space between us with a weight I could hardly bear. There was a stark contrast between Jason's youthful exuberance and the profound passion that had been a part of me for so long. As I stood at the threshold, I felt a mix of fear and exhilaration wash over me. It was the dawn of something new, a moment that stirred deep within my soul. That night, everything we had been trying to conceal came to the surface, raw and undeniable. I allowed myself to sink into the softness of the bed, feeling the weight of the day slowly lift from my shoulders. My body feels heavy with fatigue, yet my thoughts swirl endlessly, refusing to settle. My breath came in uneven waves, each inhale a reminder of the turmoil within me. As my foot gently grazed the soft fabric of my dress sprawled on the floor, I felt a wave of memories wash over me, each thread whispering stories of moments long past. Jason's eyes were fixed on me, and I could sense an intense, silent energy radiating from his gaze, enveloping me in a moment that felt both heavy and profound. A moment later, he leaned down and picked up the dress, his fingers gently grazing the place where my foot had rested, stirring a quiet reflection within me. Even that simple act ignited a warmth within me, stirring something deep inside. As I held the dress, I caught a fleeting moment of uncertainty in his expression, but it vanished almost instantly, giving way to a resolute look that lingered in my mind. I watched as she set the dress aside, her hands gently finding their way to the edge of the bed. A quiet moment hung in the air, filled with unspoken thoughts and feelings that seemed to linger just out of reach. With a gentle hesitance, I found myself climbing onto the mattress, each movement deliberate and filled with a quiet contemplation. My heart felt heavy as I watched her movements, each one careful and deliberate, as if she were navigating through a world filled with unspoken thoughts and emotions. As he drew closer, I could see the emotions flickering across his face, a blend of excitement and an undeniable pull that seemed to resonate deep within me. As I lay on the other side of the bed, I could sense Jason's presence enveloping me, a quiet reminder of the bond we shared. My heart thudded steadily, each beat resonating within me. As I took a moment to pause, I felt my breath grow deeper. As I watched him lean closer, a profound awareness washed over me, revealing how the space that once separated us had nearly vanished. It felt like I was standing at the edge of something profound, as if the world around me had shifted and I was caught in the stillness of that moment. In that moment, I realized there was no turning back, and the emotions swirling within me were almost too much to bear. It was a strange mix of pain and exhilaration intertwining within me, leaving me to ponder the depths of my feelings. As I gazed up at the ceiling, Jason's face came into focus, and I found myself captivated by the gentle way he swept his hair back from his forehead with his hand. In his eyes, I could glimpse the depths of Jason's emotions. He radiated warmth, a vibrant hue that mirrored the joy bubbling within him. In that moment, his excitement felt almost palpable, a reflection of pure happiness that enveloped us both. As I watched him, I felt a deep sense of connection to the fervor he poured into every action. His breathlessness struck a chord within me, stirring emotions I couldn't quite articulate. I I watched him pour his heart into everything he did, and I felt a deep sense of connection as I noticed the way he struggled to catch his breath. Jason, you have awakened feelings within me so profound that I found solace in the moment our car broke down. I find myself unable to shake the memories of this hotel, Jason murmured, his voice quivering with emotion. His words felt like a burden, each one weighing down on me, as if I were struggling to take a breath. As I looked into her eyes, I noticed a flicker of uncertainty, her hands betraying a subtle tremor that spoke volumes. My body felt tense, muscles contracting with each careful movement, as if I were trying to hold on to a fleeting memory, cherishing it just a little longer. I find myself wishing my father would never consider selling the car again, he reflected, and after he spoke those words, he allowed himself to sink down beside me. As he closed his eyes, silence enveloped him and he found himself lost in the stillness, allowing his breath to gradually find its rhythm once more. In that moment, I felt utterly drained, as if every ounce of energy had been siphoned away, leaving me with nothing but silence. My legs twitched restlessly, and I found myself lost in the quiet moments, unaware of when sleep had gently taken me away. The next morning, I found Jason back the car repaired, and he gently reminded me that we needed to pick up Michael and head to the city where he was waiting for us. A wave of regret washed over me, tangled with a swirl of mixed emotions, yet beneath it all, a flicker of excitement stirred within me. As I gazed at Jason, I felt the weight of his eyes, the depth of his actions. Everything about him stirred something within me. Everything felt so tangled, and yet I found myself lost in uncertainty about what lay ahead. In that moment, I found myself torn between the swirling questions in my mind and the deep, unshakable emotions that tugged at my heart. In that moment, amidst the swirling thoughts and feelings, there was a singular truth that anchored me. This journey feels like the turning point, the moment when everything might shift in ways I can't yet comprehend. If you've journeyed with me to this point, I sense that my story has touched something deep within you. I find myself reflecting on the moments we share. If you feel a connection, perhaps consider pressing the follow button, turning on notifications, and sharing your thoughts about this story with us. Your voice matters in this journey. I find myself eagerly anticipating your thoughts, wondering how they might resonate with my own reflections.